There we go. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that this 2 hour session and Friday's 2 hour session is going to be about species selection, design and layout, pasture assessments, planting patterns, mapping, aftercare, and farmer consultation. We're fitting it all into 4 hours. But then on May 7th, we're having an in-field planning session with Joshua at a farm in Chemung County. The invite and registration for that is coming soon. We're just figuring out the parking and how many people we can fit and all that good stuff. And then registration should be out. I'm thinking after the retreat, so I have a minute to get all that together, but look for it in early April. And so I'll turn it over to Joshua so you can squeak out every last minute that we're going to need for this. And I will stop sharing and let you share.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me, everyone. Um, it's nice and sunny here, and we're pretty excited about the planting season. As a matter of fact, for us, it began on Monday, was our first project. Um, After digging some trees and getting tree orders in and all that stuff. So, yeah, great. It's great to be a part of this. I kind of laid out an agenda, um, which I'm roughly going to try to follow. So I just kind of want to give a little overview of that. It'll probably just be verbal because the page that I'm sharing with, going to share with you doesn't have that on there. But I'll start out with just a little bit of introduction of myself and what TFG does, and then I have sort of two shortish design principles presentations. One of them is a little more permaculture and oriented, and the other one's a little more farm slash like production oriented. And then we'll take a look at our intake forms and silvopasture questionnaire, which is something that we ask all of our sort of incoming potential clients to fill out. And I thought maybe at that point, maybe it makes sense to take a little break, just so we can stretch for a second, but also um, we could ask everyone to fill that out. And so you can sort of see like what questions we're asking our farmers, our producers, and what we're trying to learn, because that's a big part of the planning process is trying to get inside the head of the farmer. Um, I know, scary. And try to figure out what their goals are, what they want to pursue silvopasture. So we can either maybe we can make that a homework assignment for kind of next session on Friday. We could also kind of take a little look at that at our break time. And then from there I'll try to go to the maps that we'll share together. I'll use a program that we use a lot called Overyield, and then I'll share with you a map from Canopy Compass. We'll take a look at Google Earth Pro and then maybe the Web Soil Survey. And then I think from there, what we'll try to do is we'll try to um, brainstorm some different planting arrangements that might be working with the farmer's goals, even though we kind of need to articulate those ahead of our planning process there. So I'll try to share my screen with you. Um, Close a few other things to get them out of the way here. And I know, like usually when I share on Zoom, I can't seem to control things very well while I'm sharing. So I was trying to get my, let's see how this works. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, I can
Oh,
see it, but it's not the presenter mode.
right, understood. Yeah, I just got
Okay.
to click one more button there. Okay, how's that look?
Looks great.
Okay. So this is yeah, not too much about the title today, but I just want to jump in and show you a few photos at the start, tell you a little bit about what we're doing at our farm and then what TFG does in general. So this is a farm down in Lancaster County that we've planted. It's one that is really growing well. Some of this was planted 2 and 3 years ago, and just give you a little idea of some of the types of projects that we do. This is the home farm where I am with our beef cattle and my family. The Some of the things that we do on our farm. We raise cats, which seems to be a thing on a lot of farms. We haven't figured out how to commodify those. We have beef cattle. We have pastured poultry. We got into custom grazing a couple years ago, and that's been our kind of main grazing enterprise for the organic dairy industry. We have some little hip campsites that they're probably more trouble than they're worth, but we love having people on our farm. And so my wife's kind of our host there, and we have sort of tent sites, which we're taking to the next level this year with some little outhouses. So we're hedging toward glamping, I suppose. And then we have a livestock nursery that we've started that's probably another hobby project. But at some point we'll have a lot of steaks here. So that's another thing that we do. This is just a quick look at our farm. It's the piece along the left with the forested area is a long stretch of stream. We have a lot of fenced out acreage on our farm, and almost all of that consisted of pretty large diameter ash trees that have since uh, bit the dust. And it's one of our kind of management concerns that it's kind of been in the back burner. We keep the fence lines mowed, but those of you that are here, a lot of you are in the buffer world, and I guess next step here is we have 4 goats that we're playing with this spring. But that's also where our campsites are. We have a lot of permanent fence on our farm, mostly because um, we really wanted to just be able to dial in the grazing without a lot of extra labor. I guess we turn some of that labor into fence maintenance we can do with some hired help. But yeah, each of those then gets subdivided a lot. So we have water and fence all over this farm, which is about 70 acres that you're looking at there. Just a few shots to the cows. We have a section of walnuts that we're thinning out over time, some overgrown areas that we're also doing a little bit of thinning as well. And that's Owen, my right-hand man. And in this particular pasture, we planted it out with trees, which I think you'll see on a map a little bit later. Um, in terms of our pasture poultry, we are managing those pens in between tree rows now, and I've learned a few things about spacing, and that's part of what I bring today too, is just a lot of practical kind of experience with some of the stuff that we're trying. We raise a few turkeys as well, and then I always like to give a mention of my grandfather, who was part squirrel, as I've told some of you in other presentations, and his farm. Uh, my brother just mentioned last night when he retired, which I think was the first time maybe like 72, and then he kind of went part-time. The newspaper clipping said he was going to spend more time with his wife and tend to his pecan trees. And so at one time, all the fields on the left and the right of the driveway were planted out with pecans. And then my uncle pastured a kind of a set stock cow-calf operation, but we could see how effective those trees were at bringing shade to those animals. And then, of course, the collection of the nuts was the big family task that continued to sort of reunite us. So a little bit about my heritage, and that's kind of why I wanted to plan out my farm. This is a plan that was put together by a guy at Trees for Graziers before I worked there, Harrison, with whom I work now. And it's interesting, a lot of the plan was really solid, a few things that I tweaked here and there, but we've essentially followed that in about, say, three phases. So in our company, um, we do planning. We have four consultants actually that are three of us essentially full time and another guy part time. And we really try to get our planning done in the high summer and in the winter. It seems like it doesn't always work out like that. And we're still like planning, trying to get final drawings and things done this spring. We have a crew out on the on farms that we have planned. And one of the things I think that makes our company kind of tick is like the planners help with the implementation. We also help with the aftercare. And so it's kind of like this vertically integrated system, which sounds like a great way to raise prices or something if you're, Arthur Daniels Midland. But what it does is it gets us in the field on our projects during aftercare season, and we're kind of able to see like, oh, that really worked well, or that didn't work well, or these trees are doing really well in the system, these are not. And so it's kind of like a feedback loop that's pretty nice. Um, and then we mentioned tree stock here because we are tissue culturing and grafting and cultivating the trees that we want to see on our projects. This was one of our first ones, Fiddle Creek Dairy. Many of our early plantings were planted incredibly densely because of the money being from water quality riparian buffers, kind of extended buffers. So these are like 6 feet apart, um, which is something we would never recommend, but sometimes you have to do what the funding calls for. This is that farm from the air, and it really worked quite well. It's a central lane, and each of those tree rows became a paddock boundary, so it's essentially like a little polywire fence out area. And those paddocks are sort of a half day grazing ration. And you'll see the big difference between the left and the right of the lane in terms of mortality. And that was largely because of vole damage, and I think the use of coconut coir mats over there was and no vulgars was one of the big ones. So learn these lessons by doing this stuff. Springwood Organic Dairy is another one. You'll hear dairy a lot because um, organic dairy farms, the requirement from the certifiers is 30% dry matter intake. So that's grass, hay, um, with all the moisture cooked out from pasture, and they have to provide records for that, and you can sort of figure it out based on how much gets fed in the barn and the intake need of those animals. And so that's like a limiting factor on a lot of these small farms is like, how do we get 30% from pasture for a small dairy with a really small land holding? And the solution seems to be, well, if we can keep those cows from trying to get back to the barn and keep them on pasture grazing, then that'll be a potential. So hence shade is really, really high on the list for these grazers. And then number two is probably winter feed through like honey locust pods or persimmons and that sort of thing. I don't have to spend long here, but funding is challenging with folks that tend not to accept grants. On the other hand, the NRCS in Pennsylvania doesn't fund it, and they have been the major uh, source of income or sorry, for grants of any type. What's changing right now is that the middle one at the bottom, that ACAP which is the a state program, is now going to be funding silvopasture. So we do a lot of chasing of funding. We're having more DIY projects. In fact, the first project that we just did today was about, I think it was about 1,000 stems paid out of pocket. One of the things that we've learned, just focus on the last item here for a second, is that silvopasture plantings are labor intensive. Um, the reason being is often the layout is very particular. If you're laying out a buffer, nobody's too keen on evaluating that. If you're in Lancaster County and you set down a straight row, all of a sudden the rest of the things have to be straight. And when you're only planting, say, 25 to 50 trees per the acre, then putting those in the right places becomes more important. Um, the more diverse that planting is on the landscape, there's a lot more people movement. Whereas if you're in a buffer and you plant a tree every 10 feet, um, you can just keep going and going. But if you have to drive all over the farm for those 10 trees, then it becomes a little more labor intensive. Trees have to be protected. This thing that we're always kind of working on is how do we get these trees off to a good start? And the vole is the killer of trees, or maybe I should say any rodents. We found some places where some rodent has climbed to the top of our vole guards and nibbled the tree at about like a foot off the ground. We started using these new vole guards that have little breathable expanded. It's kind of in a roll, so it can expand, and it looks like the little creatures can crawl up there and enjoy the mineral rich bark. So for the most part, though, we've been very successful with the Volgars. We might go back to the smoothish vinyl ones that they can't climb, but who would have thought that rodents would be in there climbing to get that bark? But I guess in the winter time, there's not a lot else going on. And then, of course, you'll hear me say this a lot, but aftercare or maintenance of those trees has been the key to getting these things to survive well. So before 2024, we planted about 25 farms. 2024, we did plant about 20 farms. Um, and then this year, 2020, 2026, we got quite a list of projects to go. So it seems like the demand is here, and we're trying to get it all done. For us, the planting season's usually like middle of March. This year, that did not happen um, because of how cold it was. And then we really like to be wrapped up by the end of April. So we mostly planted bare roots, and the live stake piece that you'll hear me talk about here and there is it's critical, especially for those hybrid poplars, to have them in a very dormant state. And our success rate goes way down as we get later in April, as those little trees tend to try to leaf out. So a little bit on shade, as I mentioned, that was the kind of number one component, or sorry, goal for the people that work with us. And the type of shade that we're trying to create, this dappled, tall, moving, distributed shade, um, to some extent, has led us to prefer pioneer type trees, trees that are quite happy in early succession. Um, trees like tulip poplar that kind of like to shoot up straight and kind of more lollipop in form. And we tend not uh, to look for trees that are a little more heavy in shade, broader spreading trees like a maple tree in the middle of the yard. Um, Tends not to be what we want because of the amount of shade and then the amount of leaf litter and that sort of thing. So that's why we tend to go toward these these pioneer trees. This is a black locust, probably about 3 years old, and it's got a real light shade profile. Um, you'll see the problem of having one little piece of shade in the pasture is that's where the nutrients end up. So hence the kind of distributed shade. Um, we're often trying to bring in some shade for that kind of summer slump where the warm season annuals it are. The studies show that if we can keep the shade profile, the shade percentage below 50, and I think typically we shoot for more like 35%, somewhere in that range, um, that it will not compete with cool season perennials. We might have a little less cool season production in the spring, in the flush, but we'll get more in that summer slump due to the microclimate under those trees. There's an elm. Again, we kind of like late leaf out trees too. Those are some black walnuts, and they don't cast a heavy shade, which is great. But I think from there, um, I'm gonna jump. Oh, I guess I got another slide or two. I'll hit real quick after that video. You don't need to hear that right now. Let's see. Oh, so just a few other considerations. Well, late season fodder is another one that I mentioned. Um, these trees can be great quality feed, black locust trees for alfalfa quality. The livestock will leave the grasses unless they're really tender spring grasses and prefer the tree leaves over those others. We'll talk through some of the details of protection in person and some my cattle taking a look at some apple trees. So I'm going to jump over to, if I can find my little mouse here, I'll try to jump over to the other presentation. I'll come up for air here.
No questions or anything so far.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so let's just get into some design principles. Yeah, this is the weird thing for me on Zoom is like my mouse like becomes translucent, so I can't find it. Once I find it, I can get where I'm going. There we go. Okay, can you see me now? Let's see.
I can't see anything yet except for like a black
Oh, here we
line.
go. There we go. How's that?
Oh, that looks great.
Okay. Yeah, and yeah, interrupt me here if you see something you want to ask about, because it's a little weird because I can't see anyone. So for all I know, I could be talking to my bedroom wall here. But
We're
so
listening.
what's that?
We're listening.
Okay, great.
Definitely interesting. Carry on.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, it's like, all right, thumbs up. Um, okay, so let's talk about the design process. This is my colleague Jono's presentation that he shared at um one of our Silver Pro events. So I'll follow this with mine, which has got a slightly different focus, but I think this will be helpful for everybody to kind of think about as you guys think about planting some silvopasture. So um the role of the designer. I like this definition to facilitate a simple functional system that will work for both the manager and the land. Um, what we start as an anchor point is that the land manager is is probably got his or her ways of doing things, and we want to try to figure out what those are so that as much as possible, what we do in our plan won't conflict. There's a little side by side in the photo there. If farmers used to checking the cows with a side by side, and we put a bunch of polywire in that path, then that's going to be unsettling. That's going to disturb the status quo. So as much as possible, if we can observe, ask really good questions, then the right design will surface. So as we think about how this would work, we kind of like to get to asking the farmer, the producer, like, what's the goal? Or rather before that, what's the vision? What would you like your farm to look like? And what are the things that are going on that are causing you to look for some other types of agriculture, silvopasture, for example? Um, so I think it's a really important and fun part of the process is to get say like what would this farm look like if you could design it how you wanted? Because many times um, folks get in kind of a survival mode, and when you get to spend time with a planner or consultant, it can be like, oh yeah, I could do that, I could do that, and all of a sudden the wheels start churning, and it's really our own um, creativity then and drive that's often the missing piece between what we want and what we actually do. So after the big dream, then we got to get into the goals of um, how will you reach that and kind of break it down into smaller steps. And then we also want to understand the context of what's happening on the land, um, kind of past and present in terms of management and ecology. And so we want to try to take all these things um, and let them dictate our design. So that process, which I like Harrison's stance there. I think it goes better with a cup of coffee. That's a form of supporting agroforestry. Is kind of getting those first impressions, being with the farmer, seeing what's on the ground, then trying to articulate the vision and what those goals are. That we'll get into making a base map of the site, assessing and analyzing the site. And then kind of the fifth step there, starting to do the design work, and there's a lot of different parts to that, and then finally implementing the plan and then evaluating the results of that work. Which I'll probably say this again, but we find it's a really there's a lot of excitement sometimes for like picking up a new type of enterprise, and it's like, well, why don't we just plant the whole farm in trees and we'll do silvopasture everywhere, to be perfect. But we try to really advocate strongly for like let's do a medium, a small phase one plan and see if it actually works and you like it before we do the whole farm or a significant chunk because um, we really need buy-in from farmers. This is not like it's not like an annual crop where you can say, well, I tried growing oats last year on that didn't work too well, or I was gonna bale some covers and I didn't like it, so I plowed up and planted corn. And it's like this is a little different because there's not necessarily a whole lot more money than you're gonna lay out for your seed and fertilizer this year, but there's some investment there that we want to respect and we don't want to waste our time. There's plenty of good things to do. So, um, and then Jono is really big on this, and I appreciate this a lot, is really trying to articulate the goals. What is the mission of this design? And I would say, like, from the perspective of the producer. Now, I realized I kind of glanced through the list here. We got a lot of different represented organizations. Um, you might have different missions spinning around in your head. Maybe you're thinking about how many trees are going to be in this watershed. But at least we need to try to adopt and identify what the mission of the farmer is. Those primary goals could be shade for livestock and pasture. Uh, that is shade for the pasture as well as shade for the livestock. Summer browse, maybe fodder. Somebody called me this morning. They have a bunch of goats, and keeping those goats up off of the ground, having plenty of browse could be an important goal for, wet seasons where the parasite load's really heavy. Winter feed, shelter. Um, we have lots of folks that have basically outwinter animals, but there's like 3 bad weeks, not just when it's really cold, but when it's like cold and wet, that they might rather plant a few acres of kind of windbreak or a winter barn rather than taking out a third mortgage and building a shed. There could be timber aspirations, firewood, fence posts, tree crops. We find that most of those types of things always come in kind of second. Like most of our clients are mostly grazers and they want to be better grazers and they don't really want to go into like the nut business or the fruit business. So maybe like homestead scale apple, a few apples around the homestead might make the whole thing more exciting for part of the family. And so that's often kind of like a secondary goal. Hunting, wouldn't underestimate that one. Um, a lot of farmers would love to draw uh, the deer out of the woods a few times in the archery season, in the rifle season, which is a real possibility when you have some apple trees and persimmon trees out in the middle of the pasture. So yeah, so that's kind of on this can go, but those are, see here if I can go to the next slide. There we go. The context of the land management, site assessment, and analysis. So we want to find out about the farm. Um, who's there? What's the size? What's the enterprise? I think a lot about like how busy are the people that are going to be signing up for this? Are they going to have any extra time for maintenance? Are they going to farm all that out to someone else? What kind of livestock, of course? What kind of machinery do they have? Some small farms have a 6 foot bush hog, and Springwood Dairy that I showed you, they have a 30-foot batwing mower. And so those are very, very different. Some people are only running around on, small machines, and that's going to change things. Um, Grazing style. For a while, we were kind of using grazing styles like a screen to like see if these people are a good fit. It's like, do you rotationally graze your animal? No. It's like, well, probably not going to be a good fit because we're just thinking so much about the pressure on these trees over a long time. I think we've kind of backed off on that a little bit because the tree protection system that we've been using is pretty effective. So I think in some ways we could probably handle some set stocking. Um, and so actually there's some advantages to set stocking in some ways if you have trees that could drop a few fruits every day that could be helpful rather than just coming around once a season and you might miss the window. But again, trying to understand how they graze. And then areas of interest on the farm, identifying the planting areas and then rating their priority. So if we have, 5 fields, um, do all of these need to be planted out, or what are the first ones? So on the ground sleuthing, gathering observations, interpreting the questions, looking for some of the environmental niches there, inventorying the site, what trees are growing there, and then kind of breaking that down using the scale of permanence. And when it's time to um, do some design, it's great to do a bunch of sketches, do some brainstorming. It's helpful to know how the farmers are moving through those fields, I find. Um, and then as we move on, we can get more detailed. Sometimes we might just lay out some certain areas, like we'd like trees over in this area. Well, then we get more specific on the spacing and the species and the protection over time. So that's kind of like I'm going pretty fast here, but like our general process is that um, we do outreach, we do education, we'll do intake, and I'll go through these steps and a little more slowly, looking inside my project management documents a little bit later. But as we do intake, we'll have a phone call, ask people to do our questionnaire, and then do that first visit, and then do some design. And there's a bunch of steps here back and forth with the farmer along the way. So like, are you comfortable with this? Can you picture this on your farm? Trying to get them good information so they can react to it. And then looking at a maintenance plan. And it's interesting because, some people have lots of ideas about what types of trees and where they should go. And other people say, you guys are the experts, you do it. So we get all the above. I went out with Organic Valley dairy farmer, and he knew we were working on this really steep contour, and he knew right where every tree line should start and stop. So all I did was put flags in the ground because he knew like where he could actually run his mower and where he couldn't. And so he wanted to plant all those really steep areas. So you'll find that along the way. Here, I'll need some reaction on this. Here's a farm that I'll show you a bit later. Um, kind of lay it out, design, but what do you see? Who's out there? That's what I thought. You guys all fell asleep.
Nobody knows.
Okay, so this is a weird farm, but so can you see my mouse or no?
Yeah, we
Oh,
can see your
there it
mouse.
is.
Yeah,
Just not sure what we're
what
looking
are
at.
those lines?
What are
Are
those
Yeah.
little
those lines?
squiggly
Are
lines?
those
Yeah,
like
that's a question
chicken?
I have for you guys. What are those little lines?
Worms.
Yep, worms have infested his pasture. Not really. What's actually that's his bale grazing. Um, so he will roll out. This farmer is he's a really good grazer, and he rolls out bales all over the pasture, and he like systematically tries to cover all the ground in um in the winter season. He's got a little 3-point hitch bale unroller, so he's technically not grazing whole bales, but rolling it out. So I thought this was pretty cool that you kind of catch that on the Google map. Um, that's a management thing that, with silvopasture, is a planting going to get in the way of that, or is he going to be able to work around that? So we got to know how he's kind of doing that. Um, at the end of the thing, the process of kind of taking the goals and articulating it, we really have I like to break that down into a nice overview of the farm and kind of like the goals articulation. So this one reads, take a second to read through this so you can hear some of the different parts. Drager Farms is a 50-acre farm raising grass-fed beef through management-intensive grazing on 40 acres of pasture. Nathan Drager seeks to work with nature in all aspects of the farm and consequently is looking for more diversity and ecological solutions to better his land's output and overall health. He wants to add trees to his pasture primarily for heat stress and overall diversity, but also values the other potential benefits of silvopasture. He is not facing any major management or ecological issues on his land. He would like to prioritize planting the open fields behind the barn and house where he has not already planted trees, and would like for his grazing system to remain flexible and adaptable to different paddock sizes and layouts, as well as leaving a buffer around his buried water lines. The planting area overall is flat with no major obstacles. So, what I was thinking about as I'm reading this is here's a guy who has a lot of grazing experience and he doesn't want any sort of fixed fence lines. So he's going to be a candidate for our overpass protection system where we can still run polywire under those tree rows. But I'm thinking about maybe some of the folks that you guys might be working with who are just getting their feet wet with rotational grazing. And I can see a great case where using those tree rows for paddock boundaries could just help that grazer out. Envisioning and having a kind of semi-permanent fence lines laid out in a grid. And so I can still imagine a silvopasture plan that's almost set up specifically for a new grazer in order to give some shape to this big old, this big wide open field, perhaps. So that's the overview. We then created a proposal. Trees for Graziers will create a plan to plant trees into the two pastures in phase one, spring of 2023, two additional pastures in phase two, spring 2024. The layout for phase one will consist of a diverse mix of 10 trees to be planted for heat stress, diversity, and fodder on 40-foot rows with 20-foot spacing in row. The tree layout in all paddocks will follow 4 different planting patterns to give off a more natural tree planting appearance. So Nathan, he did not want any pattern, which is almost impossible to to lay out. I mean, I guess you could go out there and get, since we have 10 trees, you could take 2 dice out there and keep rolling them. Or maybe there's some random number generator on the internet you could use to figure out your planting patterns. So in the end, they did 4 different patterns so that they would only repeat after kind of a enough distance that you wouldn't see any repetition. I think they might have started on a different tree too, so that would send the pattern a little bit off. The tree layout and all those paddocks will follow those different planting patterns. The plan will utilize an overpass polywire system to allow cattle to move freely under the trees. The plan, implementation, and aftercare of 4 years will be paid for by funding obtained by the Lancaster Farmland Trust. Any tree species not obtainable this year will be planted in the spring of 2024, in that case where grafted honey locusts weren't ready yet. So that's the proposal that we picked. Here are the actual tree species patterns. So layout 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all for phase one. So there were black locusts, persimmons, poplars, willows, mulberries. Let's see, there were also tulip poplars and hickories in that first round. And then we had several other just patterns for later on. So this is that same farm laid out on a map. Whoops, let me back up. I was going to try to zoom in on that slide, but what you can see, hopefully that's big enough for you, is that we have his water line system where it says blue and piping. These water lines buried. You can see we stay away from those in this farm. I've planted a lot of trees on my water lines. I may come to regret that, but for the most part, it's not like it's a source of water, which would be a problem like for a drain. So we've tried to stay away from the water lines. You'll notice in the middle of his farm, there's kind of like a little weird square rectangular thing of trees. That's actually a kind of a low spot, um, a drainage area. I'm not sure if it's running water all year round. I don't think so. But that's where the cattle had gone all the time for shade, which is very likely the case on these farms where there's some kind of a creek, is that they'll use that for cattle shade. And so we're basically pulling those cows away from that water body and giving them some some comfortable lounging areas out in the pasture. Um, this again is kind of like the project synopsis for each area. We have the primary goals listed out. Um, when it comes time to um, go to planting, we'll actually list the quantity of trees, the spacing, and then we have tree count inventory that we have to do as well. You'll see the mention of the patterns there. There's planting mix two and what that looks like. There's 13 trees in that one. Then there's the planting mix one on the Depot Road pasture, which is 82 trees with 8 rows. And we don't use these maps exactly for, or this exactly for our tree count, but this is what we like to have. There's a note about the black locust, poplars, and willows will likely be thinned, coppiced, or pollarded around 10 to 15 years to prevent overshading. So on this farm, we planted 20 feet between trees in the row. So we have 3 types in there that we would expect we would get rid of. The black locust maybe are going to be a fence post in 15 years or 20. And then the poplars and the willows will probably just cut out at that point, and maybe even sooner because this shade is a kind of a moving target. All
There were a
right.
few questions that came in. It would
Oh,
now be a
great,
good
great.
time.
Okay.
All right, so Holly asked what the time horizon is from when you come in to do outreach and design to implementation of a new system. And she has a follow-up too, so you can answer that one and then we'll follow up.
Okay, so it was the timeline.
Yeah,
Um, it really depends on how motivated they are. I mean, usually we're looking at if they come to us right now, it's like, are you going to want to plant this fall or are you going to want to plant next spring? Since we just kind of have those 2 seasons in our calendar, um, that's usually the question. If they're not in a hurry and you know our fall looks really busy and they want us to do the work, um, then we might try to, schedule it for spring. So
sounds
those
like
are kind of the two main ways, yeah.
sounds like you can get it planned pretty quickly though.
Well, yeah, so if I didn't have this in a slide yet, I mean, we usually will um try to do that site assessment, which is 3 hours on the farm. Um, our farmer does the consultation, or sorry, the questionnaire usually ahead of that. So we already kind of have like an idea of what they're trying to do when we get there, and we can just kind of clarify um what we didn't understand from his questionnaire. And then we estimate, it's going to be between 10 and 30 hours of planning. I mean, for the most part, if on these small farms where we're looking at one pasture, it can it it can take less time than that. It just depends on um how many pastures we're looking at and how complex they want to do. And if their goals are for some of the standard ones that we've done a lot of patterns for, we go fast.
Okay, and then a follow-up to the timing is like, this is like long-term timing, I believe, and Holly, feel free to chime in. But would a reasonable long-term lease, what would that long-term lease look like, I guess, for an agroforestry system? How long would you want that to be?
Oh boy, I don't know. Um, I don't have a good answer for that one. So a lease situation, um, I mean, is just a rule of thumb. I mean, it's going to be maybe 3 to 5 years where you kind of get some benefit from shade. And if it's any other goal like fruit or timber, it's going to be much longer. So I'd want it to be long. I wouldn't, I don't know that we've done any projects on leased land. Um, I think we'd like to, like, there's groups like Iroquois Valley, that have like a regenerative mission to kind of help people get on land. That we aspire to do some of those projects, but I don't have any really good info on that.
I think up here too, it might be a little bit longer until you start seeing some shade benefit.
Yeah, the farther north you go, the longer time horizon you need to make
Yep,
it
and
work.
then Amanda is just expressing interest in the species selection, but I think that you'll be going over more about species selection later.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And we can jump on it at any time. I mean, these trees are in the photo are honey locusts, and in many ways just the perfect kind of shade because it's light and dappled. Um, so that's often what we're looking for is that type of shade.
Okay, you're not sharing anything right now, right?
Okay, well there
Yeah.
we go.
But maybe like a previous picture showed dappled. Yeah.
Okay, let's again, I don't know how that happened, but we'll jump back into sharing somehow. Okay. Yeah, I'll start it up on the next one.
Okay, that was all the questions so far.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks. Um, okay, so the next one is how we doing on time? We got about, all right, that was about 50 minutes already. Let me try to share again. This next one I can go pretty fast on as well, and is again some more kind of design principle related stuff. I'm not even seeing how to share my screen right now, so I don't know what happened. Let's see here.
Okay, let me take a look. It says you're a co-host, so you should be able to share.
There it is. Just had to get back to the other.
User error, got it.
Yep, always. Is that showing up then?
Yep, looks
Got
good.
me. Okay. Well, that's what I was trying to say earlier is that these were honey locust trees. And they have even rather than like a hourglass shape, they almost have like a wine glass shape. Um, so I think here and what we're trying to think about here is I've got three images on here. One is the Combs Farm that we're going to dial in on the left, and then on the top right is like laying down a few different random patterns that I just did really fast just for the photo. And then to where we get to in the main photo there, you're seeing that's actually at Drager's farm once again, the same farm that I showed you. And you can see his cows are actually running under the overpass wire. They're just kind of marching through the farmer's in the back right corner. He just opened the poly wire up and the cows are going to pasture. So that's our kind of goal for this is to see that built out. Um, this may or may not be helpful for right now, but just real quick, like on our website, we have two consulting options that if you go to our getting started page, you'll see like option A, sign up for a brainstorm. And it's a 45-minute question, session. We usually ask people, can you send us your maps and your sketches ahead of time so we can spend a little time looking at things and then um, just giving them some feedback. I mean, we have people that are laying out their own plans. They think they know what they want and they just want somebody else to take a look. And that's something we're glad to do. It seems like there's a lot of value for it since we looked at a lot of different plans. And then the other one is the more comprehensive plan writing. And what you'll see there is we always recommend that people read the Grazier's Guide to Trees. It's really not that long of a book. And we kind of feel like if people can't buy and read the book, then maybe they're not the right fit for us. They're not, not that interested. Not that we ask them, we don't give the test or make them sign it that they've read the book, but that's just like what we always recommend. And then we have an online questionnaire at that point. And I almost feel like this is one of those hurdles. Like if you really want to work with us, you got to get through the entire questionnaire because whenever I take it, it feels kind of long. And I told a guy it was a half an hour, and he goes, "You were wrong about that." He said it was at least an hour, and I think it says that on our form that it will take an hour to fill it out. Um, I will sometimes want to skip this step, and I'm told by my other consultants, no, 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 because like also maybe we can do this verbally. Like, no, we always learn stuff from the questionnaire, and um, it's a good starting point for us. Um, so those are those two products that I was just telling you about. We tried to make it easier for people to work with us by just like signing up online for those things. Um, and people feel a little more comfortable to do that sometimes than to, call your phone number, send you an email or whatever. So then, um, yeah, let's jump in. So these are kind of slides you've seen already of my farm. One of the things that we really like to encourage is that a farm kind of get the whole farm plan. Not necessarily laying out trees everywhere, but at least thinking about what's going to happen in different areas of the farm. And the challenge here is that the funding almost never covers planning. Um, so like if you go to work with the government, there's no money for you to hire a plan. I mean, they'll plan it for you. I guess in grazing planning, you can get somebody else to do it for you, which is almost impossible. Um, and you can get a forest, a cap CPA 106 written for you if you can find a forester. But especially if we can get some detail for, the first couple phases of the project. Um, Use simple tree patterns. Um, I showed you the one where there were like four different patterns on the farm. Uh, let's see if I flash forward one screen. Here's another guy. This is his tree pattern. I ended up doing it color coded. He didn't want any trees to like land in the same line, and that made it really hard. Like simple patterns are so much easier. This was like 6 rows of trees, and you can't imagine how much fun I had trying to keep the honey locust from lining up. Um, Something simple. I'm thinking about you guys too. Your group, you're going to be subcontracting this out. If you want to have success in getting somebody else to plan out what you've laid out on paper, it's going to have to be pretty simple. Maybe like 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, something like that. Um, it helps a lot. I mean, Harrison can keep like 7 tree pattern in his head. For me, after like two, I kind of have to look at a piece of paper. So like one that's listed here is black locust, willow, black locust, poplar. That's a kind of a common like shade layout for us. The same with the spacing. If you can use a simple spacing on the whole farm, that really can help. Obviously, you can have more complexity in your maps and have a 40-20 area here and a 60-20 over here and a 100 by 25 over here. But it just adds to the complexity if you're trying to get somebody else to do that for you. Um, I like the idea that if you lay out the whole farm kind of with the same spacing, the grazer can use the tree rows and the number of trees to calculate acreage. So let's say I'm going down 6 trees, 2 rows, and I can do the math and figure out how many acres I'm there. I'm grazing per paddock. I did everything on my farm, all like, all my T-posts are at like 25 feet or whatever. And it's the same way that people use fence posts. I give them 3 fence posts a day or whatever. That could be a nice help to grazers. Um, Keep in mind though that like that shade thing is such a moving target. I have some different like sort of like shade calculator things. The data from this came from Noble, which has this pecan tree calculator, so you can get how many trees per acre when you put the between row and in row spacing. Um, we do a lot of early on, we've done a lot of like 20-foot in row spacing. I would say the advantages to that are that it holds the poly wire really well. Um, if you've run poly wire with pigtail posts, if you start stretching out those pigtail posts and all of a sudden you get a big slump in your poly wire and you're worried about your cows jumping over that spot. And so when you keep them a little tighter, it's easier to deal with that. I think what we're kind of thinking about though is this whole plan of taking out a lot of trees in year 5 or 7. It's gonna be a lot of work. Um, if you're taking out 5-year-old willow trees, you got to figure out how to get all those on the ground and drag them off or get a chipper. And so it might be better to think about planting the trees that you want there. And maybe you can plant bigger trees so you get that shade a little faster. Um, and maybe you still want to plan on doing this removal thing or pollarding technique or something like that. But it's going to be sooner than you think and probably more labor than you want to think. I like a lot of our farms are like 60 feet between row and 20 feet in row. That gives you 36 trees per acre. One that I don't have on here that's a really nice spacing is like 35 between and 35 in row, and that gives you 35 trees per acre. Um, I probably have should have put this slide ahead, but like we've we do straight rows on most of our farms. Um, Now there's like a kind of more permaculture focus on like retaining water and that sort of thing and doing like key line plowing and planting in the along the furrow. Um, and there could be some value in that. I think the steeper the farm is, maybe the more that could make sense. But if your planting is really low density, it doesn't really matter which configuration you plant those rows in. You're not really going to gain in like water retention, right? Unless you let that whole tree row grow up into some kind of brushy thing, you're not really going to be sending water down, unless of course you want to do key line plowing. I'm pretty big on keeping the rows straight, and this is a drone shot of the western field of my farm where I planted out fence lines, which is another great project. These are planted. I kind of graze up and down these little strips, and I'm using all those rows as paddock boundaries now. So where it used to take me half an hour to set up polywire and lots of polywire, it's really simple. So here's a farm where actually this farm is kind of like the perfect grass farm. The homestead is right in the dead center of these four big sections. They make hay, like high quality hay out in the southern two sections. And then in the back and the north side of the farm, kind of northwest, there's like a bunch of permanent fence lines where they run the heifers and dry cows and stuff like that. Not so much the dairy cows. And then we planted all those fence lines out about 2 feet from the fence line, protected those with a little piece of aluminum wire. And it's just really nice way to put shade on that north side of the farm. Still has the southern part open for like hay production. Oops, I'm gonna keep going here. So here's another. I think I'm focused here on maybe finding the priority areas, which I think I still had number 4 there, but number 5. So what you see in this slide is that in the dead center of this farm is the farmstead. You get a bunch of barns and buildings. And then notice where the silvopastures are um, on this farm. Basically, everything in the map is part of this land holdings. So all the silvopastures are a really long way from the home farm for the most part. So they're far south and far north. Those are places where the cows have to cross a road to get to the pastures. And so um, those are the day pastures. So after the cows milk in the morning, they go out to sections in the north or sections in the south. And that's where they want shade because it's going to be during the hot part of the day. And then all the pastures right around the barn after the evening milking, the cows get kicked out to pastures that are right adjacent to the barn so they don't have to cross any roads in the evening. So it's interesting. Those are the priority areas. Um, I have another dairy farmer I'm working with, and he's got a spot where the cows have to walk like almost a mile and a half to get to the back pasture, and that's where he wants the trees to be because that's going to be where they're all going to be um, heat stressed. So then from there, of course, you got to break that plan down into some phases and find those target areas. And I suggest starting small, but then also with easy establishing trees. Got to leave space for machines and movement. I showed you my chicken pens earlier. I gave plenty of room for my chicken pens. But then when it came time to turn them at the end of the row, I'm like, man, I really should have one less tree on the end of here because getting everybody turned around and going back to the other end of the pasture is a little bit of a, I don't know, kind of a parking nightmare there. It's not bad, but I wish I had a little more. The other thing is I left plenty of room for my pens, but then what if I want to drive my truck and trailer by there to collect chickens? So, on other people's farms, they're always really more err on the conservative side and leave plenty of space on the end of rows. And I think I already showed you these earlier. So I think that's the end of this slide, this bit here. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to well, let me come up for air a second here too.
Yeah, let's see. We have
Yeah.
another question from Amanda about the overpass system.
Okay.
I don't quite understand it, so if you want to come off mute, maybe you can ask that.
Yeah, actually, we're just talking with the farmer about it the other day, just wondering how that overpass system fares when you got trees that are going to be, up and over it and 20 feet tall by, 5 or 6 years in. Um, how do you make sure that it's not damaging that overpass as the trees grow? The
hmm
wire.
Yeah, I mean everything that we're trying, we're kind of learning new things every year, but um what we're finding is that like around year if they're fast growing trees like willows and poplars, like in year 4 or 5, like they're busting out of the tree shelters. And so at that point, um, if there are other trees that still need protected in that row, then we'll tie that poly wire to a piece of the plastic tubing and kind of keep it in that spot just using an insulator. So there's a lot of things like that that need to be figured out along the way. And
Do
that's
you just
kind of in
basically retrofit it as you go, as they
yeah,
grow?
pretty much. I mean,
Okay.
like our system is, it's figured out for like 5 years. And then as we know, like some of these trees are still going to be vulnerable after that. So there's going to be other um, little little duas, little insulators that really need to be made. Like in my brain, I have one that's like UV resistant, like bungee cord that's not that you can tie polywire anywhere and then it'll like expand. I'm trying to get Kenko to work with me on developing some like insulators like that. I mean, it could be where we have to come in and put poly posts in next on each side of the trees and to protect them at certain times of the year. We don't have all that figured out for sure.
Couple more questions. Chuck
Mhm.
wants to know how big your chicken tractors are. What are the dimensions?
Okay. Those are the Easy Glider pasture pens. I put them in the PASA like innovation. I had a lot of fun making those. I could spend the next half hour on this, so thanks for the offer. Um, so they're like 6 by 14. and they're made out of 5 10-foot sticks of EMT conduit that I use a hoop bender from Johnny's Seeds to make, and then I put them on a treated frame that's three-sided. It's like a front and two sides. And then the back, my main innovation is like I have all these stumps in my field from all the um all the leftover autumn olives, so I have like a little metal flap that will jump, kind of a little stump jumper. It also keeps me from killing chickens, so I think I have some slideshow for that I could share at some point, but
Great. So he's wondering if you are running 1.75 to 2.5 square feet per bird.
I have no idea. Um, in those 6 pens, I'll usually have 250 birds. So let's see, there's about 40 per pen. But we move them every day or twice a day when we're running them, especially near the end. I like to move them twice a day. It's a lot of it's a lot of nitrogen in one spot at the end there.
You're running about 2.1 square feet, if that's not including feeders or waters in there too.
See, the water's hanging so they can get under that one. The
Yep.
feeder, I have just a homemade uh feeder. So okay, I'm good.
Awesome.
Thanks, Chuck. Amanda wonders how long trees need to be protected from livestock. And maybe years won't coincide with years up here. Maybe sizes would be a better estimation for all of us.
Yep. Sizes and species is a really big thing too. It's pretty well known. I think maybe, I don't know if Brett's on here, but he's been sending me, photos of like 10-year-old black locusts that when the when the sap runs in the spring, there's just a mineral content there that seems irresistible. So sheep and goats will strip those trees. I think Erica Frenay sent or had an anecdote about her sheep getting them in just any time of the year. So, but if it's a black walnut tree, it's really going to be tough, and I doubt you'll ever have any problems after that, after it's over an inch in diameter. So it seems like certain times of the year, I know my cattle love, I think it must be the smell, but my sassafras trees, they just love rubbing on those trees. I don't think they're killing or girdling them because they're like, 8 inches in diameter, but it just seems like a target tree. So I think we'll have to work together and find out like, what are the trees that we really have to watch out for and when. Because you don't want to plant a tree, take care of it for 10 years and then have it um, stripped.
Thanks. I have a question. You
Sure.
showed a farm plan, just the most recent one you showed where the farmer kicks the cows out to the faraway places during the day. The trees in those areas were of different orientation, some lines running east-west, some lines running north-south. How do you decide, or is that not so much a deciding factor? Like, how do you decide which ways
Mm-hmm.
you're running your trees?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of the way the sun behaves and the way the shade will move, if we have all things being equal, north-south orientation will spread the shade around more. So you can kind of, you can have to work through this in your imagination. Depends on how good you are, maybe at geometry. But like, if you have a row going east and west, and the sun travels um, in the same configuration, you pretty much get a blob of shade just on the north side of that tree row the whole day. Whereas if you're planting north and south, then that shade will kind of move from the west side in the morning and it'll end up on the east side, north side at noon and then the east side in the west. So you get a little more shade movement. But I would say for the most part, if you are protecting with polywire, it's much more important to prioritize how the farmer moves through the field, which is usually a function of the contour of the land. So let's see, I have a farm where there's a pretty steep section of silvopasture. I'd say it's class C soil, so probably 15 to 20% slope. It's the kind of hillside where you're not going to go sideways with a manure spreader. You're going to maybe go up and down it. So I planted my rows up and down because I think that's how they're going to drive their tractor in a safe way. Um, if I cross that hill on the contour, then there's no way they can, really do spreading of manure there carefully, safely. I think in this farm, um, this is a weird place. Like all of these trees are protected with just barbed wire. And it's kind of like and so there's barbed wire around planter tree shelters. And from what we've observed while we're there is the cattle just use them for scratching posts. They're walking these trees down, but the planter shelters are pretty tough. And it seems like there's very few broken stakes there, and most of the trees seem fine too. But I would say the answer to this farm is like the running of machines um, on those fields. So if you planted, let's say that's a little purple rectangle in the top left corner, if you planted that north and south, then there would be ridiculously short runs for the bush hog. Is that making sense?
Yes.
But I would always prioritize like um, tree movement. I'm sorry, not tree movement, farmer movement. There we
Okay.
go.
Amanda has a follow-up. Is there a
Okay.
list of species and potential concerns or vulnerabilities to different livestock?
Are some species more vulnerable to livestock? Was that the question?
Is if there's a list of
Oh,
species. Yeah.
I just thought that'd be a really useful tool that had, listed out various species that you're recommending and then, all the potential concerns associated with
mhm.
management, whether it's trimming or removal or whether it's livestock concerns or whatever.
hmm yeah, I'll share it with you on our website. Let's see. I think I can jump over there now. Are you able to see my screen?
All right, yep, we're seeing what you're zooming or Googling, I think.
Okay. I was just gonna plunk in our website and say like if you go to the Learn page, um, and I can paste these into, but the bottom of the page you'll see some resources. And we have the tree species profiles, which is kind of what you're asking about. It's about 30-page PDF you can kind of take a look at.
Yeah, that looks great. Perfect. Thank you.
And we have a silvopasture planting plan, which is kind of what we're going to talk through next, which is a little bit like our document that we use for planning, although it's a little bit different than this one is, but like this is our questionnaire. So I'm just going to back up to where I was earlier. So those are those two resources. Hopefully I'm not making you dizzy.
Perfect, thank you.
Then this is our planting plan with like explanation. It's like, why are we asking those questions? Some recommended nurseries. This is our silvopasture cost share proposal. We have an economic model which goes into an Excel spreadsheet, and you can basically put all the values in and see when the trees should start to pay for themselves based on your goals there. And yeah, there's a few other um, resources there. I think I just put this one up. This is that farm that I was just showing. I just created like a little profile of that farm, and there's another one there. I'm putting one more up here pretty soon if I can get it finished. So you can kind of see like that farm, what it looks like, what the goals are, what the planning look like, phase one, and so that might be helpful for you guys to look through as well.
Thank you. So it is 2:20. Did you want to take a break or are you good to
No, I'm
go?
happy to keep if everybody's fine, I'm happy to keep going. I think what I would prefer is maybe we can just take a look at the questionnaire and then everybody can do that. Um before we come back, maybe Friday. Would that work well,
Sure,
Lydia? That way-
yep, and I'll put the questionnaire in the chat.
Okay, yeah, great. So there's like kind of two back-to-back questionnaires. Um, or I should say forms. The first one is just us collecting interested people's like name and contact information, what their farm is, and why they want silvopasture. I think it's like 5 questions. Let's see, I think I can probably just show you that here. We used to use a Google Doc for it. We'll email a paper version out. So if you click on getting started and you go to our online questionnaire, it's a fill out form and um, it's just got a few questions. And this one is just mostly filling out our um, contact info. And then the second one, which I think you'll see the link for it in the chat, is the one that's focused on silvopasture. And it's got, it says it will take about an hour. Yeah, Lydia's got that there in the chat. So I'm going to click on that one so you can. Oops, that was the wrong one. And it's got sort of introduction, farm context, animal context, planning, and next steps. So if everyone can do that, maybe not in the next half hour, but after that, then and maybe we can get our farmer to do it as well before Friday. That might be helpful too. Then we can kind of keep that ball rolling. So let's see. I'm gonna look. This is my little agenda that I was working from. So here's where we're at right now. We could take a little break if people feel like it. If we need a stretch break, we could do that for like 3 minutes. What do you think, Lydia?
Yeah, I think we can do that. And in the meantime, if you can look at the chat, there's a set of questions from Amanda there. So let's
Okay.
come back. I have 2:25 on my time,
Okay.
so 2:30 we will be starting. And take a look at
Okay.
Amanda's questions there. It'd be better for you to just read them instead of me translating them, probably.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna take a quick walk. Be right back. Oh, buddy. Interesting.
All right, we are approaching the minute.
We're getting there.
I guess in the last seconds before 2:30, I'll just put a plug in here. If you haven't already put your name and affiliation in the chat, please do so, so we have the record of that. And for those of you who don't know, we'll be having our second session, 2-hour session with Joshua on Friday, 1 to 3. And we'll follow that up with an in-field training on May 7th. Registration to come. And I'll turn it back over to you, Joshua. It's 2:30.
All right. So, we'll start by just taking the question that you referred to. Um, whoops. So the question was along the lines of, well, I'll read it here. When do trees impact the main forage grass production? And how do you mitigate potential concerns or conflicts with mechanical harvest or hay production? One grazer said they only plan on permanent pasture. How would you promote trees for grazers silvopasturing to farmers who are not yet convinced or haven't bought in yet? What are the benefits and co-benefits? So the first part of the question, how do trees impact the main forage or grass production? Um, the research is pretty solid on this, and I think a lot of anecdotal evidence will follow too, is that if you stay below that 50% shade, and I would typically go a good bit lower than that in terms of like 25 to 35% shade, that the cool season grasses will not suffer, will not be less productive. And a lot of it has to do with the way that like C3 photosynthesis plants don't require as much light. They're not using all the light that they get. And what we've seen, Harrison has a lot of anecdotes about this too, is like in July and August when you're really a lot of the forage tends to get pretty well baked, cooked from the sun, is you'll find the best forages under those trees. So it seems like that little microclimate there, which allows the morning dew to kind of stay there a little longer, is the key to that. And
So
I'll,
that's,
go
I
ahead.
could just say that's interesting because I guess my My observations have been the competition for water in July, August, that's where we see some concerns is right.
Is that because of like field edges
Yeah, and
or?
just even not so much even field edges, just in some places where we have trees along the boundary, and it's more at the root line, I guess, maybe than immediately under the trees. So
Mhm. I mean, what I normally see is there's all kinds of animals under the one tree that's in the pasture, and that's the impact region. But that there's like zero forage under there. Um, yeah, that's my experience. I wouldn't say that. The second part is how do you mitigate potential concerns or conflicts with mechanical harvester hay production? I really, for those, then this is one of the conversations we want to have with our farmer. Like, are there places where you plan on making hay? Um, we would strongly discourage the silvopasture planting in those areas. I would say the one potential workaround would be like having really wide spacing, but knowing that when you get to the point where those trees are actually producing shade, that's not going to work even with a wide spacing, just because drying hay depends on their hay technique. But if you're trying to make dry hay, you want all the sun that you can. Um, if you're making hay in a day like most of our grazers do, they don't really care how wet it is. They just basically bale it almost as soon as they cut it. So they could possibly do that. But yeah, it's a lot of interruption of the hay production. So if that's going to be part of the management, let's look somewhere else. I would say like most of our grazers though are confident that they can change the species if they of those pastures just by the grazing management. Um, if they'd like to do that. Um, for those that haven't bought in, um, how would you promote silvopasturing to farmers? Um, it's a good question. I think if they don't have any experience with heat stress livestock or haven't found a weakness in their grazing system, maybe we're not the right fit for them. I would just say like our our grazers in Lancaster County, it was like an idea like when they started to think about it, they realized it was solving a problem that they had, which was the heat stress piece. And it kind of made sense to them almost intuitively that if they could have shade there, that would take their grazing and allow them to graze those pastures in the summer. So that's not a full great answer to your question, but hopefully that helps a little bit. I see your hands is raised as well, if that's still the case.
yeah, it just was so some of it go back to some of the traditional, like when we're promoting grazing itself, we're talking about convincing farmers to give up some of their best cropland for their pastures and creating pastures in the best areas, right? Because they are going to be the most productive and provide the best and highest quality forage for their animals.
Mm-hmm.
And for years I was taught, and frankly, I've practiced and experienced, that as long as they have adequate water, they didn't that shade wasn't critical. And so now I sort of feel like now we're coming back and sort of saying, well, maybe we
Mm-hmm.
do need shade, and just how to navigate that, as a government employee, having said, oh, you don't need to worry about shade as long as you got ample water. And now we're coming back and saying, well, maybe you do need shade, and how we kind of,
Mm-hmm.
have that dialogue.
I mean, so like I would say like somebody like Russ, my grazing mentor, like he's strongly called for heat stress. If there's a cow out there with its tongue hanging out, she was off the farm. Um, it seems like in dairy we have a different situation where like um a lot of the genetics are designed um for production. Um, the other thing that people seem to be tuned in is like we get, whether it's what side you're on, I don't know, but like, are there really getting more profound, like hot, or seasonal hot spots? I know the climate maps are suggesting that our zones are shifting, so that could be part of the conversation too. I know the people that I trust the most are people that see the bulk tank. Like dairy farmers get a daily report card that the beef folks, like down in Virginia, for example, um, Jacob Gilley, he was with the American Farmland Trust. I know Ben, who's on the call, would know him. Like he said, beef farmers go backwards all summer because they have endophyte infested fescue and heat stress. And so they just hope not to lose too much weight in the summer and then they get all their gains in the wintertime. So that's just kind of some of the thoughts I have around it. I know for me, like as a grazer, I've got places on the farm where like in August, if I give cattle an out to get back to the shade, that's right where they are. Um, the data is like at 65 degrees, cattle will go to the shade, and I've seen them go. I have pictures of them in the fall. It's in November, and they're standing in the shadow of the buffer on like a 50-degree day um because the sun's out. Well, we should probably, yeah, good stuff. Not trying to avoid that conversation at all because we can keep going on it, but I did want to get into like some of the other stuff that we could try to do in the last 20 minutes here. Am I sharing my screen right now or
I
not
don't
yet?
see it yet.
Okay, let me share again with you. All right, there we go. Okay, can you see that? It's got like a little map of us USC zone there.
Yep, we see it.
Okay. Okay, so this is just a little program that we use called Notion. There's This is just a way that we organize our projects. And so you can kind of see here our little agenda. We had our 5-minute break. Um, I think we can sort of skip what we're trying to learn from the questionnaire until next week. I think you understood that. Trying to figure out, besides how the farmer um, manages the land, we also want to know if there's any, for example, Nathan Drager has all these pipelines running through his farm. There are other considerations that we have to work around. What kind of equipment? So let's move on then to before we get to the maps, overyield, and these programs. I'll just show you what I have is we have a table of contents, and this has everything that we try to put together for a project. Um, we'll have tasks, and those are basically empty right now in notes. And then we're able to write to ourselves. And this is kind of the project flow chart. We're trying to talk to a prospective client. Then we have the intake portion of it. And select that. And then in the case that we're at with this pilot project, we've already done the prospective client, we've already done the intake. And so now we're kind of getting ready for the consultation, which would be like our in-person meeting or our Zoom meeting where we try to understand what's going on there. So my first line is to create a base map on overyield. So I'm going to tab over to my, let's see. Can you see my browser or no? Let me try to share my whole screen this time. Entire screen. Now can you see what happened? I don't see it yet.
Not yet. Well, I can see your.
How's that?
There we go.
Okay. So the tabs that I have open, I had our TFG intake form that you guys are already going to do, our silvopasture questionnaire. I have a web soil survey tab open, which I'm imagining all of you are familiar with. And then I have Overyield, and Overyield is a software that's developed by um, Propagate, and it's what we use to lay out our tree rows. or our planting plans. It's nice because it's designed for agroforestry stuff, and so there's some nice things about it. It's a little bit pricey. I can't remember how much it is a month for our team. It might be a couple $1,000 a year, but so for me to make this map, which there's not really much here at this point, I just took the address and I think I used the parcel, or maybe I just drew this boundary map out. So that's kind of where what we're looking at. In terms of the base layer, I have a few different options for looking at this is the satellite map that they used to have called NAIP. This is Mapbox, and this is Azure Global Satellite. So those are the kind of three options. The Azure one seems like it has a little more detail. Okay, so there's the map. What we can do is we can look at, and we could do this with the web soil survey too, right? We ultimately want to know, like, are those soils, are there hydric soils? Are there wetlands there? Is that a lot will affect like what the species are? So I just on the web soil survey, I just typed in this address, and it kind of gave me this it's kind of buggy. I don't know if it's a little slow. I can't seem to control it. But on overyield, I can do the same thing. I can click on the soil types, which should work. And I can load for the farm boundary or for the current view. So I'll just select that. And let's try that one. It says it's loading. I don't know why. Okay, there we go. And now I can kind of see all of the soils kind of at a pretty quick clip there. And I can see I've got some Class C soils, Marden, Shannery, Silt, Loam. I'm assuming you guys probably know these soils a little bit. This one's the Lordstown, Channery, Silt, Loam, Class C. We have the Arnott. I've heard of that before. Class B soils, 2 to 8%. And then down here, this is Volusia Class C soil. So those soils you guys are all familiar with?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes with the topography here. Volusia's your poorly drained, Martin
Mm-hmm.
is moderately drained, and
Mm-hmm.
Lordstown is somewhat well drained.
Okay. Yep. And so as I'm looking at that map, um, I'm gonna jump over to let's see if I can find this really quickly that I think we have shared this in that little drive that I shared with you. So this is Canopy Compass. Are you guys familiar with that at all?
Just through you.
Okay. So this is a product by Savannah Institute, and it's a web app. You can use it. You can go try it. It's now it was going to be they were charging for a while, but I think it's free. And so what I did is I went to this farm and I just used the parcel viewer and it put down this parcel. And then I was able to just kind of create this quick PDF, which is just another way of kind of getting at the soils data. And so what it does is it kind of puts together this whole report on the land cover, the historic vegetation, the topography, slope aspect. A lot of times it will tell you, it's telling us if it's south facing or what direction those soils are facing. Hydrology, irrigation, and crop history. And there's a bunch of other different reports. And I'm just going really fast here, talking about species richness and so on. But you can also select it for different tree crops. So I selected everything they had available. It's a bunch of tree fruit crops, small fruits, timber crops, nut crops, because at this point we have no idea what the farmer's goals are. But what I want to learn from it is mostly where are these crops potential, or these trees going to be potential in the soil according to this report, which basically uses the web soil survey and breaks it down. So so ideal is kind of like this light yellow or light cream, and then unsuitable is black. So this is aronia, black currant, black locust. So do you see how that is unsuitable on the left side on the west of the property? What is that kind of telling us there?
It doesn't like wet soils.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to learn as much as I'm trying to learn from the tree data what the soils are like as much as the other way.
Mm.
Chestnut trees, not suitable. It's telling you it's probably the whole farm is not that well drained, since these chestnuts really like that, dry upland species. Elderberry like the wetlands, and so it gives you like a real high rating for that's elderberry, pretty much suitable on the whole farm. Heart nut, a little bit on the eastern part. Hybrid hazelnuts on the east side of the farm is better drained soils. Spruce, pecan, unsuitable. Persimmon, plum, quinces. So I don't use this as like a hard and fast thing, but it kind of tells me like that line going through the farm left and right, which basically corresponds with that Volusia soil, is going to be it's going to be a good place for um, wetland riparian bottom species, but maybe not for species that are that need to dry out. So I thought that'd be a helpful way to thing to see. And again, you can kind of go to Canopy Compass and create one of those reports. You might have to create a login, but then they'll email you and it'll send you that beautiful PDF, which is was full of all kinds of good stuff, especially if you can be on the site right away. Okay, so then this is my map, and what's the next thing I kind of want to do if we're thinking about planting some silvopasture for at the Combs farm. Like my thought is exactly along the lines of the questions that Amanda was asking, is like, are there hay fields on this farm that are part of that are non-negotiable, like that we need to know what the land use is on this whole farm. So I'm just gonna hide the soil layer for right now, and just kind of take a look. I see like really central lane here. Um, I see in the farm there's actually a lot of woods um, that are within that property boundary. Uh, are those potential silvopasture sites even to um, some of these edge areas? That'd be a question I would want to figure out, because maybe there's ability for all these. Let's just say this is one of the main pasturing areas that he can bring in, find trees areas in here that are maybe full of some invasives along that row, and bring fencing in, something like that. Those are questions that I would be having. Again, is this maybe a crop field, or is this going to be in pasture? We need to know that before we can do a whole lot else with it. Some thoughts there on moving cows into the wood just a little bit. I also see this little area up here. I'm wondering what that's all about. Does anyone know the farmer that can maybe speak to some of those questions on his behalf?
Unfortunately,
So
Ellie.
that particular,
Oh,
that
sorry.
particular, no, you're good. That particular field, there's two separate pastures in that, and they utilize those woods currently.
Okay.
Everything else is strictly pasture. That long piece up above is actually a pasture. They utilize the woods at the top and that triangular piece, but they're not allowed to use the woods by the retention pond due to a contract.
Well, is there a retention pond down in this area?
No, their retention pond is to the west.
Oh, down in here?
Nope, further south.
Oh, where this other house lot is.
Yes.
Okay, okay. All right. So, those are interesting things. I mean, so none of this is available. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And then some over here potentially or no? Yeah, and this section is, right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, so
And they utilize that piece currently now with that corner piece.
okay. Is it all
But the,
open to cattle or do they fence them out and give them little sections or how do they manage it?
so they rotationally graze between each of these lots
Hmm.
throughout the summer.
Okay.
But the ones to the south where we aren't able to use those woods is where they're struggling with getting them out of the heat during the summertime. That one
Okay.
and then the narrow strip in the middle.
This piece here.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, and then that's kind of what it looks like to me. Is like this looks available for shade. So, all the grazing going around that nice little copse could be managed to give, strip graze it this way. I'm not sure how intensive the grazing is for this farm. Um, but maybe we don't need to touch that. And that's great because then we can use, this can stay open for hay production. Do the cows, this is a beef farm, right? So the cows pretty much stay out and do they have water out in these outer fields?
So there is a natural spring at the top where they have a spring development in that pasture. And then
Mhm.
there is an above summer watering system that runs up that lane.
Okay. All right. So they got water out here. And yeah, and so since this is out of bounds and there's potential to get shade, there's already shade up here. The priority area might um be part of this pasture. And since the way this map is oriented too, like there should be there's a little strip of shade here, right, during the summertime in the middle of the day, but maybe not in the west. So maybe this might be the priority area of trying to bring in a tree planting in that space. Okay, so that's kind of what we need to figure out, and then we can do some sketches. And I'm gonna jump back over to my Notion list here just to kind of show you some of the other things that we would try to do before we um, along the way. So we already talked about creating the base map. We'd like to have that before we go there because we can already kind of look at the soils data. Then we're gonna on our system, we create a file for our farmer there. Then we plan the visit, and then we have a kind of consultation document which basically just follows up a lot of the questions that we had generated from our questionnaire. This is like just stuff for us to remember. You need the tape measure, the shovel, the planting plan, or maps and handouts. This is kind of like our process, things that we're going to be looking at while we go there. Which if I don't remember to mention this again, we bring a shovel along, we can dig some shovel tests. That's really important. If as the Either if you're contracting it out or if you're going to be doing the planting, are you going to be able to dig holes? Like when we're down in Lancaster County, we can almost always just like dig a hole with a shovel and it takes 2 seconds. But when you come up to where I live on Quarry Drive, guess what you're going to find? Uh, channers or however you say that, it's going to be shannery clay loam. And so you're going to have to dig all those things out. And so in those areas, we tend to use auger. Um, so then after the consultation, what we want to do, and we'll do this with our farmer too, is we want to send him a summary document. This is your land, livestock context. This is what we think your primary vision and goals are and your priority areas. And so, would you like us to keep going and write a full plan with a view to doing to implementing this on your farm? So we'll do that. And then from there, if this is a little nitty gritty, that stuff that you guys wouldn't have to deal with, but like if it's for us, we have to send him a bill. He signs a contract so that we then work on the design work. And all that stuff really kind of happened before we went to the farm. I mentioned earlier, like maybe 10 to 30 hours. I think most of our plans can actually come in under that if it's a simple and we come up with this is the one area he wants trees, then we'll just knock it out. Um, dig some test holes, and then when we go, if it's a remote consultation, like I would say with this particular one coming up in a week or so, like I would try to lay down, like depending on how good my maps are. Sorry for tabbing around here, but like if I can't really see those fence line corners in my imagery, like a lot of times in the shadow of woods, you can't tell where those fence corners are. So I'll like to take my GPS unit along so that I can like know exactly where those corners are. So that way when I come back to my map and I want to have 50 feet or 60 feet from that fence corner, then I don't have to go back to the farm, which would be a long trip in this case, or try to figure it out some other way. So that can really help out. So then we talked a little bit about doing the research on the soils. We're not dialing in on um, what species will really grow well in each place, like that compass map does, but we don't want to try to plant upland trees in wetlands and vice versa. In general, the trees are going to be able to handle some variation in soils, but we just don't want to plant like a mulberry tree in a wetland and vice versa with those trees. So then we'll follow up with the client after we get our design finished and clarify and make sure that the client understands what that's going to look like. And then we're kind of working on this implementation contract. And then from there, um, well, if we're going to do the planting, we'll need to give them an estimate. And what we then have two documents where we have a portfolio of the project that we give the client. It's like, this is what we did, this is what your goals are, this is how you need to maintain it. And then also we have a crew lead that we need to get ready for the implementation. So I think I'm hearing people like jumping off because of the time, so maybe I can
Yep.
stop
Yeah.
there. Okay. I'm seeing a
Yeah,
new
so I guess we'll just pick it up from here on Friday.
Sure, I would think so. What I was gonna say is like an assignment would be like, well, first the questionnaire. Let's have everybody do that, and those could actually populate into our forms, so that'd be really nice. I would know who all was here. And then yeah, we can maybe have a little a sketch session where people kind of submit some different plans. Do you think the farmer will be able to have some info from him or
I just asked Haley. Oh, you're still on.
I'm still here. I'm just driving.
okay.
My best to try and get him to answer it.
Okay.
So what is
Um,
the questionnaire that you want us to answer?
you guys can do both if you like, the first one and the second one, but mostly I think everybody can do the silvopasture one. That way they know like what we're asking. And I would say like it might be a little clunky and too long, but it helps us try to get what we need to make the plan make sense. So,
Okay. I'll send that in a follow-up email here right after
okay,
this.
great.
Okay, thanks everybody, and we'll see you Friday.
Thanks, folks. I think I lost Holly, right? But she had a question. We'll catch it later, I guess. So, all
Yeah.
No, I'm still
right.
actually I was wondering if it's true that cattle who have shade pick up about an average of a pound a day.
I mean,
Because that's if
cattle
so, that's a
cattle
great
can
reason for
cattle can great cattle can gain more than that and really good forage. Um, but yeah, that's the whole goal is for like for beef cattle to uh, gain weight. Because if they don't gain that too, they don't finish very well. It's not even a lot of it is how much weight they gain in those last few months. Yeah.